My name is Kathy. Standing here in my condo, which has finally been restored to its former self, I'm flooded with memories of the chaos that unfolded. It all came to a head on that fateful day when I returned from a 6-week business trip in Seattle, only to find my younger sister, Lily, and my father, Mr. Thompson, had turned my place into their own. As I unlocked my front door in San Francisco, the last thing I expected was to hear Lily's infectious laughter echoing through the living room. She was standing on my plush carpet, a glass of my finest wine in her hand, chatting away with her thousands of online followers. "This is my penthouse now," she declared, "and I've finally made it big." At that moment, my world shattered. My father emerged from the kitchen, as if he owned the place. He glanced at my suitcase and said, "If you're going to be difficult, maybe you should leave." I thought I misheard him, but he repeated it, and I knew my life had changed forever. They were telling me to move out of my own condo, all in the name of family. Lily smirked, as if she'd been waiting for this moment for years. "Tell them, Kathy. You always think everything has to be about you," she said, tilting her phone towards me. What shocked me the most wasn't the mess or the strange smells, it was their calmness. It was as if they'd already made up their minds, and I was just an unwelcome guest. I took a deep breath, looked at them, and made a single call. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back to the beginning. I've always been the responsible one in my family. I work as a senior maritime compliance auditor for a large shipping company. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. It involves long hours, late night shifts, and a mountain of paperwork. But I've always been good at my job, and I've always been there for my family. Growing up, I was the one who took care of myself and helped others. By the age of 13, I was packing my own lunches and helping Lily with her school projects that she'd forgotten about until the last minute. At 17, while Lily was free to change her hobbies and schools as she pleased, I was at home taking care of our mother, Mrs. Thompson, who was often ill. If I got an A in school, it was expected. But if Lily got a C and cried, there was a whole family meeting. 3 years ago, after years of hard work and saving, I bought this condo in the heart of San Francisco. I did it all on my own, with no help from my family. I put down a 20% down payment, chose every detail of the interior, and spent 2 years making it my home. My father always called it an apartment because he couldn't stand the fact that I owned something without his input. My mother said it was nice but too modern. And Lily, well, she thought it was boring until her friends saw the view. Then she started talking about rich auntie vibes every time she visited. I never fully trusted Lily in my space. She had a habit of taking things that weren't hers. Lipsticks, necklaces, chargers, and even money left in a dish. My parents always brushed it off, saying she was just being spontaneous and young. But it was exhausting always having to keep track of my things. 6 weeks before the big blow up, my company sent me to Seattle to audit a newly acquired shipping terminal. It was a mandatory assignment, and I knew I'd be working long days. I didn't want my place to sit empty, so I told the building concierge I'd be away, left my emergency contact information, turned off the water to the washer, set the thermostat low, and locked my spare key in a coded key safe in my laundry room. Only my father and I knew the code. I'd given it to him years ago when I was sick, and I never changed it. That was my biggest mistake. About 4 weeks into my trip, I got a text from a neighbor asking if I was hosting influencer events. I thought she was joking, but then she sent me a screenshot from a social media clip. In the background, I could clearly see my dining room wall. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I immediately called Lily, but she didn't answer. When I called my father, he picked up on the second ring and said, "There's no emergency, so don't start one." He told me that Lily was between leases and he'd let her use my condo because family helps family. He also said he didn't tell me because I'd overreact. I was furious. I told him to get Lily out that night. He sighed heavily and said, "Lily has a brand deal this month and nowhere decent to film. Your old place is a dump, and you're not even there. Why are you making this so hard? When I asked if he'd used the spare key code, he said he used common sense. Then he added, Lily fits this place better than you do. She knows how to enjoy it. I hung up and called the building. The concierge confirmed that a resident authorization form had been filed, stating that Lily was a temporary occupant approved by the owner's family representative. It was clear that my father had used just enough truth to create a lie. I told the management that no one had permission to be in my condo and that I wanted written confirmation of all the documents they'd accepted. That's when I remembered the security system I'd installed a year ago. After Lily had let herself in during a family gathering and posted pictures from my balcony wearing a dress she'd taken from my closet, I decided to take precautions. I'd installed motion sensors in the hallway, a hidden camera in the living room, and another one in my office where I kept my financial records. As the security alerts started coming to my email, I couldn't sleep. I watched the short clips every night from my hotel room. Lily was bringing in racks of clothes, complaining about my food, and my mother was rearranging my kitchen. One night, Lily was doing a live shopping session on my sofa. She picked up my wallet and said, "My card is in here." Not hers, mine. 2 minutes later, my bank sent a fraud alert for a luxury shopping spree. I immediately shut down my card, downloaded the video, and started gathering evidence. I contacted a real estate attorney in San Francisco, a man named Mr. Harris, recommended by a colleague. He asked me if I wanted to handle this quietly or correctly. I said correctly. I flew back to San Francisco 2 days earlier than planned. I landed with a carry-on bag, a laptop full of evidence, and a newfound sense of calm. On the way from the airport, I opened the building's email thread and saw the forged authorization documents my father had submitted. Mr. Harris had already pointed out several legal issues. When I stepped off the elevator, I could hear music coming from my condo. My door opened before I could enter the code. There was Lily, in silk pajamas, telling her followers she was having a relaxing Sunday in her penthouse. She froze for a second when she saw me, then smiled her charming smile. "Oh my God, my sister is home and already judging me," she said to her viewers. My father came out of the kitchen, looking irritated. I asked him, "Who told you this was yours to give away?" He told me to lower my voice and said I was scaring Lily during her live session. Lily pouted and said, "She's always so territorial. Family has rights, and Kathy acts like love is a contract." I asked Lily how long she'd been sleeping in my bedroom. She said she'd moved to the guest room at first but switched because the light was better in my room. She said it so casually, wearing one of my blouses. My father then suggested that since Lily had built a following from this address, it would be better for everyone if this arrangement became permanent. He even offered me a small studio near the airport. That's when Lily made a huge mistake. She opened my fridge, took out a bottle of imported water, and said, "Kathy hates it when people touch her stuff. It's so funny because she has everything." Then she picked up my debit card and asked my father if it still worked for a flower delivery. I knew then that they'd mistaken my silence for surrender. I set down my suitcase, stepped into the hallway, and called Mr. Harris. He answered on the first ring. "I'm here." "They're in my condo," I said. He told me not to argue and that he was calling building security and the police. The next 7 minutes felt like an eternity. Lily kept screaming, calling me bitter and lonely. My father joined in, saying I was humiliating the family and that we should settle this privately. But this time, I didn't back down. When the police and building security arrived, everything changed. One officer asked who the legal owner of the condo was. I showed them my ID, the digital copy of the deed, and the ownership verification. The officer asked if anyone else had my permission to be in the condo. I said no. He also asked if they'd been told to leave and refused. I said yes and explained about the fraudulent authorization. The property manager confirmed the concerns about the documents and said the occupancy status would be revoked. Lily tried to argue that my father was family, but the officer said, blood relation doesn't override trespassing. My father quickly changed his tune, saying he'd acted in good faith and that Lily needed temporary support. When the officer asked about the unauthorized card use, I showed him the fraud alert and the video. Lily went pale and tried to claim it was a family card. But I stood my ground. The police didn't arrest them on the spot, but they documented everything and told them to leave immediately. They were informed that any attempt to re-enter would result in formal trespassing charges. My mother arrived just as they were leaving, crying and asking me how I could do this to my sister. Lily started sobbing, saying I wanted to ruin her life. My mother even said, Lily is fragile. If she spirals, it's on you. Once they were gone, I walked into my condo and saw the damage. My clothes were mixed with Lily's, my office files were in disarray, and my jewelry box was half empty. I realized how much I'd lost by staying quiet for so long. The legal process took months. Mr. Harris sent preservation notices to the building, my bank, and Lily's management agency. We gathered more evidence, and it became clear that Lily had listed my address on several brand intake forms. When her management team learned about the trespassing and financial misuse, they dropped her within 48 hours. The brand deals disappeared, and Lily's online reputation was in ruins. The family faced a lot of backlash. My father had to sell a piece of land he'd been proud of for years to pay for the legal costs. My mother withdrew from community activities. But even though I won the legal battle, I lost my family. For a long time, I couldn't sleep in my own bedroom. The smell of Lily's perfume lingered, and every little noise in the hallway woke me up. I started therapy after a panic attack in a grocery store. My therapist said something that really hit me, Kathy, the problem isn't just that they used you. It's that they made you believe love meant giving up your boundaries. About 4 months after the police came to my door, things were calmer on paper. The condo was repaired and the locks were changed. I started doing small things to reclaim my space, like buying new linens and hanging up old pictures. One rainy Thursday night, there was a knock on my door. I checked the camera and saw my mother standing there, soaked and holding a folder. She said she needed 5 minutes. I gave her 2. She started crying and said the family was broken, that my father wasn't himself, and that Lily was in therapy and ashamed. She knelt on the floor and asked me not to make them pay forever for one bad season. I asked her, if I had stayed quiet, would any of you have stopped? She was silent. That silence said it all. I told her I was done carrying the emotional burden of their decisions. I said forgiveness didn't mean giving them access to my life. I hoped Lily would get real help and that my father would understand the meaning of ownership. Then I said, you don't get to come through this door just because you gave birth to me. I closed the door, and as I stood there listening to her cry, I felt a deep sense of grief. But I also knew that for the first time in my life, this home was truly mine. And though the cost was high, I knew it was worth it.